What's up, everybody? My name is Dr. Zach Guiser, and this is another entry into the Athlete Development Journal, where we talk about developing speed, strength, power, health, and character so your athlete gets the most out of their athletic career. Today, we're going to talk about how you can avoid 95% of injuries. But before we do that, I want to lead with a reminder that this is not medical advice for you or your athlete. Make sure that if you have an issue, you see a qualified healthcare practitioner. This is for educational purposes only. Before we get to the injuries, let's start with your mind. And let's talk about being a conscientious killer. So there are two main character traits that I think lead to getting the most out of your athletic potential: conscientiousness and killer instinct. So let's define those both. Conscientiousness is the tendency to be organized, responsible, self-disciplined, and deliberate in the pursuit of one's goals. Or in simpler terms, conscientiousness is the ability to focus on the small details and show up with elite work ethic in everything you do. Killer instinct is the ability to flip the switch on game day and compete with confidence, ruthlessness, poise, and assertiveness. Obviously, this is not as technical as conscientiousness is, which is in the big five. This is a Zachism. Conscientiousness alone will lead to success in areas where prolonged effort wins, like becoming a doctor. But you have to have killer mode in order to perform at your highest possible level on game day. Conversely, some people have killer mode, but don't have the conscientiousness required to build their physical engine and technical skills during the offseason to maximize their God-given abilities when game day comes around. So take a look at yourself. Actually ask yourself the question, how would you rank yourself on conscientiousness and killer instinct? Are you somebody who works really hard, but maybe shies away on game day? Maybe we need to find ways to address that killer instinct. Or are you somebody who shows up on game day, but you don't show up in the same way every other day throughout the year, even whenever the stakes are much lower? Maybe we need to work on your conscientiousness. Where do you think you sit? Let's move on to the body and talk about how we can stop 95% of injuries from happening. So most injuries happen at the beginning of the season. Why? Well, there's a rapid spike in how much work you're doing, which we call volume, and how hard that work is, which we call intensity. We'll call the combination of volume and intensity load to make it simple. Injuries happen when the amount of load placed on a body part exceeds the amount of load that body part can currently handle. We'll call this your load capacity. Our bodies are incredible, however, and they can adapt to be able to handle more load over time. If you do too much too quickly, you'll cross your body's current load capacity and end up injured, which is shown in this graph if you're able to look at it. If you're not able to look at it, you're on the audio only, you see an x-axis that has time, a y-axis that has load, and you start off, you have a very unintentional, very minor increase in load, and then all of a sudden you have a rapid spike that's a straight vertical line, which crosses over this red line, which is going horizontal in parallel with your x-axis about halfway up that load graph, which is your load capacity. So it's a vertical line that goes straight through that load capacity. Your load has crossed through your load capacity, which results in injury. If, however, you get close to your load capacity but don't cross it, your body will lay down more strong tissue and increase its load capacity, which is shown here. If you continually get close to your body's load capacity without crossing it, you can push your body to be able to handle insanely high loads. And if you're on the audio version only, you can see that we have a very steady increase in load over time. So we have the same X and Y axis. As we get close, because we've had a very steady increase in load, as we get close to that injury, that load capacity, we see that load capacity also start to raise upwards, and we never actually cross that load capacity with how much load we're doing, even though we're doing much more load than we were in the other graph. We've just done it more steadily over time, and our body's been able to adapt. Think of it like getting a sunburn versus getting a tan. If you spend all winter and spring indoors, then go lay out for 5 hours on the first day of summer, you're applying a massive load of UV radiation that your skin isn't ready for. The result is a painful sunburn. And in this analogy, the UV radiation is the load and the sunburn is the injury. If instead you spend 20 to 30 minutes in the sun, you might get a little pink, but you won't burn. Unless you're my wife, you're going to burn regardless. Sorry, babe. Although she's not listening to this. She doesn't read the newsletter. She doesn't listen to the podcast. So It's a little experiment. We'll see if she ever calls me out on this. This controlled exposure is a stimulus that tells your skin to build some protection. In response, your body produces more melanin. Over time, with gradual and consistent sun exposure, you build a tan. That tan is your skin's new adaptation, its new higher load capacity. This allows you to handle more sun without getting burned. With training, the best way to avoid crossing that load capacity is reverse engineering. Start by figuring out the peak loads that you'll go through. What is the most load you'll undergo in a week span at any time throughout the season? For most athletes, that actually happens in training camp or preseason. Coaches normally go a bit crazy trying to make sure the team is conditioned enough and put more load on their athletes in preseason than their athletes will get at any point during the competitive season. So we actually have to use the off season to prepare you for preseason, not just game days. After you figure out the peak loads you'll go through, then we systematically work backwards to build up by roughly 10% each week. I like to have our athletes start roughly 6 to 8 weeks before preseason. So you would start with 40 to 60%. So you would start with 40 to 60% of your peak loads on week 1, then add 10% each week. The week before preseason starts, I like to take a step back to roughly 70% of peak loads to go into camp a bit more fresh. So if we progress that out, it would look something like this. Week 1, 40%. Week 2, 50%. Week 3, 60%. Week 4, 70%. Week 5, 80%. Week 6, 90%. Week 7, we drop back down 70%. And then the preseason hits, we're at that 100% mark. So some questions I regularly get on this. What load should I be looking at for my sport? Let me run through them real quick. If it's basketball, you want to look at jumps, sprints, change of direction, and shots. Volleyball, jumps, hits, serves. Baseball or softball, swings, throws, sprints. Soccer, sprints or running volume in general. Kicks, change of direction and jumps. Football, sprints or running volume in general. Change of direction, contacts, or throws if you're a quarterback. For all of these metrics, you want to track both volume and intensity. The next question I get, how do I figure these numbers out? So unless you have a catapult system or something similar to track your personal data, you're not going to be 100% accurate. Even if you have those tracking systems, you're not going to be 100% accurate. So you have to use the best proxy measures you can find. One way, you can watch your film, sit down with your game film, a spreadsheet, and stopwatch. Log every throw or run or change of direction or jump or whatever the metric is that we've talked about previously, and then write down the volume, which is most likely going to be distance or the number of throws or whatever it is, and the intensity, and this will likely be estimated as a percent of effort. So this is going to be a 100% accurate way you can objectively measure it, but you're going to gauge, hey, how hard was I going on that rep right there? Another way, you can look at research data. There have likely been studies on athletes around your age in your sport. That data can give you a good starting point. It will obviously be different based on style of play and rules of the game. So maybe you have 8-minute quarters versus 10-minute quarters or whatever. But it's a good starting point and you can start to make some decisions based off of that. Another thing you can do is talk to your coach. If you have a super organized coach, you might have a good idea of what exactly will be done at practice. You can use that to get a good gauge of what will be expected from you in the preseason. To make this more concrete, because I know this is abstract and it was a little hard to comprehend, I'd like to do a breakdown next week of what exactly this would look like for a high school athlete. And I'm going to include a poll in the newsletter here and then in the polls on Spotify where you can vote on what sport I will dive deep in. So if you would like me to reverse engineer basketball, volleyball, baseball, softball, or soccer, go ahead, throw your vote in there. And we're going to finish with some fuel for your soul. What is your why? It's a simple question, but the answer can be profound. Why do you do what you do? I said that the answer can be profound, but in today's world, it usually isn't. Most of the time, we're just going through the motions. We do things for the sake of doing them, because that's what everyone else is doing, or because we're simply taking the path that society has deemed the safe and normal one. The thought of wandering around aimlessly day to day absolutely terrifies me. I don't want to live a life defined by the path of least resistance and societal norms, and I don't think you do either. I want to wake up every day and make choices that fulfill my greater purpose. In order for you to do that, you need to identify your greater purpose. You need to identify your why. Your why is the reason why you do what you do. It gets you out of bed on tough days. It's what pushes you through hard training sessions when you feel like garbage. And when defined and reflected on regularly, it's your North Star and your guiding light. It gives you clarity and direction to navigate the impossible choices. Take some time to identify what makes you tick and write it down. Then look at it and think about it each day. Reflecting on my why allows me to feel peace and purpose when chaos comes, and it should do the same for you. A couple of important things to close out with. This newsletter and podcast is completely free. I spend many hours each week researching, writing, recording, editing, illustrating, whatever. The best way you can support it and allow it to continue is to share it with people you know. You can send them to gtperformance.co/newsletter and they can subscribe there. If you don't already subscribe and you're listening to this on the podcast, please go subscribe to the newsletter. And if you're listening to this just through the YouTube link or on the links from the newsletter, and you don't already follow us on your podcast platform of choice, please go follow us there. Until next time, go be great out there.
Yeah, straight A student, but I'm friends with the cool kids. Following the rules and the rubric. Freestyle on the bus and it's too lit. Everybody